Hello, Divine Redeemer, Home First Confirmation students. This is Pastor Adam here again studying the 10 Commandments as we are on the 5th commandment talking about the issue of murder and harming our neighbor. The commandment itself, you shall not murder, and what does that mean? Now you may be thinking, Pastor, why do you need to record a video about this? I mean, that's simple enough, right? Murder, I should not murder, got it. Never murdered somebody, that's easy enough. Well, apparently, it is not that easy. Because if you look at the Bible, the Old Testament, the first sin ever recorded after the original sin where Adam and Eve fell into sin, what was the first sin that happened after that? Well, it was the murder of Cain killing his brother Abel. As he was jealous of him, angry of him, he killed his brother. And we see this all throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, murder being this issue, people killing one another. And if you look at the news today or hear about what is going on in our world, again and again, murder becomes such an issue in our world and in our society. But as we talk about this commandment, it is not just murder, the act of killing somebody, that we are told not to do in this commandment. It is much more than that. So we'll get to that in a second, but there are very specific ways that people can break this commandment. And the first way is physically murdering somebody, so taking somebody's life. You see, the commandments, most of the time we think of them as being rules that God has given us to follow and how to live our lives, and that is absolutely true. But there's another way that God uses these commandments in our lives, and it is to protect us. You shall not do this for the sake of your neighbor. So in the case of the 5th commandment, you shall not murder protects life itself. All of us have been given life by God, and in the 5th commandment, God is setting this up so that life may be protected. And there are many ways that life isn't protected when murder is committed. And I talked about the most obvious way that this can happen is somebody killing somebody else. That is the most obvious way to break this commandment. Another way to break this commandment in our society, in our culture today, that sometimes it may even be legal, but as Christians we know it still isn't right, and that of course is abortion, taking the life of an unborn child. And that is another way that we as Christians believe that is murder. That is taking the life, that even though that child is not born yet, that is a child that is created by God, and God values that child so much, so God protects that child with this commandment, thou shalt not murder. Another way that people can break this commandment is something called euthanasia. Now, you may not have heard of this, but this refers to kind of end-of-life issues, where somebody who is getting older and may not have what they would say as a good quality of life, they may say, ask the doctor, take away this medical assistance from me that is helping me, I just want to end my life. Another way of saying that may be physician-assisted suicide. Now, some may say that, well, that's totally fine. It's their life. They can do whatever they want with it. But God, if He is the giver of all life, He is the only one that can give life and also is the one who can take it away. So we don't have control of when our life can end. Even if life gets tough and difficult, God is the one who will call us home. So that is another way. This euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide would be a way of breaking the 5th commandment, thou shalt not murder. And also, of course, suicide, taking one's own life. Again, even though it is our body, it is our life, God protects ourselves by being the only one that can take our life. Because God has a plan for each and every one of us, and He is the one that when our lives, as we live our lives and we look back at our lives, He is the one that will take us home to be with Him. We aren't in control of when our life should be ended, so suicide is another way of breaking this commandment. Now all three of those issues, abortion, euthanasia, suicide, very, very difficult and tough issues in our world, in our society today. And if you have any more questions about those issues and in how it relates to the fifth commandment, I would encourage you to talk to your parents as you go through this lesson. Talk to us, me, Pastor Adam, or Pastor Seth, as you go through this lesson. If you have any more questions about what that is, or if you have heard anything to the contrary about any of those things, because they are very sensitive and difficult issues in our world today. And obviously we won't have time to get into detail in a lesson here today. So I would encourage you to follow up with that. So different ways of breaking the fifth commandment is where we're at. But it is not just about murder. For how is in our catechism, if you're following along with me in our catechism, Luther's Small Catechism, if you have the same version as me, it's on page 14, the fifth commandment, you shall not murder. What does this mean? And Luther says this: we should fear and love God so that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor in his body, but help and support him in every physical need. So here it is not just about murder, but it is about caring for our neighbor, loving our neighbor, protecting him, supporting him in every circumstance. And that is what the fifth commandment is about. I love how Jesus talks about this when he talks about the fifth commandment, thou shalt not murder, and how he talks about that in his word when giving the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says these words: you've heard that it was said of those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you, everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to counsel, and whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire. So Jesus is saying that honoring and keeping the fifth commandment is not just not murdering somebody, it's caring for your neighbor, it's loving your neighbor, and it's more than that. And that's the way that we teach it, that's the way that we believe that we should follow the fifth commandment, which is just another way how we can keep Christ in our homes first. Thank you, God bless you, and we'll see you again next week.